bit as a follow-up around Brian's talk about the importance of maintaining healthy aquatic ecosystems. As we've seen, like once it's in the lake, it's pretty significant, the extent of the impacts and how fast it spreads. So this, so I want to focus on how we can prevent the spread and especially through best management practices. And part of that is I wanted to give a bit of an outline of what we've been doing as the Environment Council to help us position us to deal with those, with what's coming at us on Starry stonewort. So as Brian outlined in the picture in the top right, shows the spread throughout the Trent Severn waterway. This is the map that's shown here. It currently shows where we know it in large bands. Obviously Gilchrist Bay, the Big Duck Pond, the Lost Channel, and Mackenzie Bay. And those are pretty large bands. So we know, for example, that area of the Lost Channels is thick and well infested, probably been there the longest in Stoney Lake. But we also know that in Gilchrist Bay that it's sort of early stages of infestation, and there's some areas, especially around the boat channels, where there's increased occurrence of starry stonewort, but there's still some back bays with some good natural healthy plant communities. As Brian already pointed out, there is significant impacts around displacing aquatic plant communities and impacts to habitat for fish and aquatic species, and that leads to a decline generally in species abundance and diversity over time. So these impacts tend to have spin-off aquatic ecosystem effects, and we've seen that before with the zebra mussel, how it increases clarity, which promotes aquatic plant growth and algae blooms. So when you get multiple invasive species occurring and you get combined stressors, the ability for a healthy ecosystem to function and have resilience sort of goes down over time because of the multiple impacts. So that's really why we're focused on research and monitoring to assess and mitigate those impacts, and where possible, restore healthy ecosystem function. So this year alone has been a big year. We've geared up in a number of fronts, and we've had really overwhelmingly positive support from our 6 lake associations and the Stoney Lake Heritage Foundation, who set up the Aquatic Ecosystem Monitoring Fund and is helping with supporting our ecosystem monitoring and lake guardians. And as you can see in the pictures here from some of our training sessions and some of the sampling program already started in Gilchrist Bay. The Lake Guardian volunteers, many on the call today, thank you for joining us, have been amazing, really keen group, very interested, energetic, and have a lot to offer and bring to the program with their experience. So we've had some turtle and aquatic insect training for monitoring, and aquatic plants. Sorry, that was supposed to be aquatic plant monitoring training, and training on aquatic macrophytes and starry stonewort identification. And just getting started with the monitoring and mapping of existing known sites through starry stonewort. So we are starting with Gilchrist Bay as a sort of a primary source of not only the starry stonewort, but access and movement into the lake. So that is being set up with a grid and very detailed sampling where we should be able to identify areas where there's higher densities or abundance of starry stonewort and areas of less. So that may help us in our management approach. The Lake Guardians and some of the Environment Council reps are teaming up to have an awareness and outreach day over the August long weekend, or a couple days, in Gilchrist Bay. And also more outreach by the Lake Guardians doing dock talks and youth programs. So we've been teaming up with, I think we've made the connection, but we are working on the connection with Juniper juniper programs for youth, and also with Camp Kawartha. And the Lake Guardians are working in many fronts and helping us around researching information and reporting on current environmental topics like Starry stonewort. We have been also collaborating with Trent University and Fleming College on these projects that are getting underway this year, and a long-term monitoring design for an aquatic ecosystem approach. So there are 2 research projects to start in September 2020. One is around the water level impacts on Starry stonewort, and a second one is around the aquatic invertebrate biomonitoring program. And in aquatic invertebrates are aquatic insects like dragonflies and mayflies that have a portion of their life cycle on the bottom of the lake in the shallow areas of the lake. Another part of our work has been around collaborating with Trent Severn Waterway in the province and municipalities, as well as the university and college and the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, to develop the best management practice and to discuss how to deal with removal, as well as lots of communications activities with our newsletter and website updates. So there's been lots going on. Now, the best management practices that were attached provide the details around this. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights, but mainly this was assembled as a common sense approach to prevent the spread. So as much as possible, we want to prevent the spread throughout the lake to keep it from impacting the whole lake. So being informed like today is very helpful, where it's kind of obvious now from the talk that Brian gave and from what we've researched in the past that our actions can increase the spread. So it spreads quite easily, as we know, through fragments and bubbles. And just going in with as an example, with a weed harvester on a windy day is a high risk of spreading. So if you don't, another one is using caution. So when you're traveling through and in infested areas, make sure you're checking your motor lots. Even if you're in Gilcrest Bay and you go off a main channel into the back bay that's not really highly traveled, those areas, good chance they're not infested yet. So try to reduce, check your motor often and keep the weeds off. And we're all experienced now with this COVID situation about non-essential travel. So if your travel is unessential, then try to avoid it through heavy infested areas. And also clean, drain, and dry your boat often, like when you're taking it out of Stoney Lake, or even if you're bringing in another boat from another lake, there's still lots of other aquatic invasives out there that have not hit Stoney Lake yet. So it's a good practice to clean, drain, and dry your boat coming back into Stoney as well. A big one is to be informed when you're considering aquatic vegetation removal options. As Brian pointed out in his, based on experience, herbicides like dicot have not been effective. They've only opened up the native plant community, so to provide more room for Starry stonewort to grow and flourish. So if you don't have Starry stonewort on your waterfront, I would be very careful about hiring a weed harvester, because there's a good chance that fragments could be moving in and you may have it after. So removal at your waterfront could only lead to a big infestation in the next year or two in your waterfront. And then another piece is a permit is required. So we'll be talking to folks at Trent Severn shortly about the permitting. And another key piece is do not use chemicals. So there's no chemical approved that's effective for Starry stonewort in Canada. Dicot is mainly for Eurasian water milfoil, and it's proven that shown that it's not really effective for helping to control Starry stonewort. And we sometimes hear of some folks taking matters in their own hands and, for example, dropping chlorine pucks off their dock. And that's the kind of thing we want to avoid. Like Brian pointed out, like the impacts to water quality or other things from copper. And it's just not really helpful to start taking matters in your own hands, because it's not, in some cases, even with chemical applications, I think in the US they're finding that it increases bubble production. So I want to thank the many lake associations that have been key supporters. They've come to the table with more funding support to help us with the program this year for aquatic ecosystem monitoring and to support the lake guardians. The Stoney Lake Heritage Foundation has been a key supporter and now has set up a aquatic ecosystem monitoring fund. So all donations there to that fund are very helpful for us going forward in the long term. And there's many volunteers and partners that have been around the table, including Trent University and Fleming College and the profs there that are providing a lot of help to us and support over in these training programs. And of course, the Lake Guardians have been stellar in their involvement. So much appreciation for their involvement.